So today we're going to talk about this lady, Taylor Donahue, and why she quit intermittent fasting. The video is titled "Why I Quit Intermittent Fasting." Now, it looks like from what I'm reading that she switched over to a different eating window that's not really intermittent fasting. But we'll go ahead and take a look at it, see what we can extrapolate from this video. All right, let's go ahead and press play.
I used to be an avid intermittent faster. I had been doing it pretty much since I turned 18, and I want to tell you why I recently stopped it a few months ago. To start out, I would pretty much do the 16-hour fast where I wouldn't eat after 8 or 9 p.m., and then I'd have my first meal at like 12 or 1 p.m. the next day. Now, don't get me wrong,
12 or 1 p.m. Okay.
it definitely works and has lots of health benefits that come with it. What really started to not work for me was I found that waiting till noon to eat my first meal sometimes worked if I wasn't hungry, but if I was hungry, I would just fixate on food and think about it until noon. And then at noon, I would almost binge. So when I was in my feeding window, that sounds so funny, I felt like I would almost overdo it and consume too much food. And then my stomach would hurt. So it'd go on a completely empty stomach to eating too much. And
See, this is something I mean, this is her experience. This is something that she's experienced. But when looking at data, right, because her experience is 100% valid. I'm not removing from what she's saying. But it is also anecdotal, which means it could happen to her, but doesn't mean that it'll necessarily happen to you. When we look at these kind of things where someone is saying, this is why I didn't do it, this is why I don't do it, this is my personal experience, they're almost also saying, and this is kind of advice for you too, right? Like they'll say stuff like, oh no, I'm not trying to tell you what to do, but I'm just doing it myself. And they say that kind of to kind of be on the fence, kind of look like they're floating, and they're not taking any position. So they're not really teaching anybody. They're just making videos. But really what they're doing when they do these videos is to give you advice, because they know that is why you're clicking on it. They know that you want to know why somebody stopped doing something, because you want to see if you should stop doing something. So when she says that she was hungry and all this stuff, looking at the data, looking at the studies, and we've had studies that shown, over 12 months of intermittent fasting. We have 6 months of intermittent fasting. The appetite has gone down. Hunger has gone down for those who have consistently done intermittent fasting, be it the 16-8 with time restricted feeding, early time restricted feeding where you do it earlier, where you break your eating window earlier rather than later. They've shown this in the data to be very successful for hunger control. That is not to say or to disqualify what she's saying and say that she did not experience this. It's not to say that. It's just that when you see videos like this, understand that her experience, although very valid because it is her experience, is also anecdotal and does not necessarily represent the vast majority of people. When looking at data that sample sizes a larger group of people than just one person, we see the opposite happens and people are not necessarily feeling like they have to binge eat. However, people like intuitive eating coaches, they love to latch on to these anecdotal things and say, oh, intermittent fasting will make you binge eat. Look at this one person's, experience. And one person's experience is not a tool to be used to create any sort of regimen or anything like that for other people. Data and large sample sizes are. All right, let's continue.
just was not good. It also really started to get hard with my college schedule because I'd go out to late dinners with friends or breakfasts before noon with my friends, and I wanted to eat at those functions.
All of that stuff is valid. All of that stuff is valid. I always say to make sure that you create an eating regimen or an eating whatever, even if it's not intermittent fasting, make sure you create something that works for you. And by works for you is not, oh my God, can I do this because I might feel hungry? Oh my God, I don't like this diet. I don't like that food. It's what works for you all around. Is it going to be something that you could easily do? It doesn't mix in with your social life. Is it something that you can do for the rest of your life? Can you picture yourself doing this for the rest of your life? Because a lot of people just use these kind of like weight loss tools or weight loss diets and stuff to just get to a certain point. But when you think of it in that way, you're going to have weight regain. It's going to be automatic because you'll stop paying attention, and over time, things will just start to creep in, and you'll gain the weight back. So you have to think incredibly long term. And if you can't fit it into your lifestyle where you feel that it is comfortable, that it fits perfectly, then you have to reevaluate what you're doing to lose weight, because it has to be a lifestyle change, not just a short-term diet.
No, it just wasn't realistic. What really works for me now is still not eating after 8 or 9 p.m., but then still having breakfast the next morning. So I used to be an avid intermittent faster. I had been doing it
I guess it got cut off. Okay, so she basically does 12 to 14 hour fast now, which in my opinion is not necessarily intermittent fasting. And the reason that I say this is because people like Dr. Stephen Anton, somebody that I've communicated with many times, and who has done more than 78 plus intermittent fasting studies, that's been published in public journals, right? He's created a system based off of the data that he's seen, where he talks about the metabolic switchover effect, and that effect doesn't even take place until around 8 to 12 hours of fasting, right? Since from your last meal, if you don't eat for about 8 to 12 hours, you get into what's called a metabolic switchover. But it's 8 to 12 hours, so we don't know exactly when is your most optimal time when you're in that fat burning range, which one of the reasons why I recommend the Lumen. And this video necessarily isn't specifically sponsored by them right now, but I am, I am, they do sponsor this channel, and I definitely recommend. I have a link down in the description box below. You can click and check out Lumen, and it tells you when you're breathing into it if you're burning fat or if you're burning carbs. If you're burning carbs, you haven't switched over yet. So it's a really cool tool to know where your transition happens. Like, what time does it happen for you? So if you want, go ahead and click on that. It gives you, I think, about $100 off on the link if you put the code in Fledge. $50 off if you put the code in once you click that link. But with the metabolic switch over, the thing is, once you do that switch over is when all of those processes begin. That's when the ketones start to come in. So they're using fatty acids. So if you hit 8 o'clock, let's say your metabolic switch over starts at 8. If you hit 8 o'clock and you start eating, you effectively shut down your the entire burning process, because you ate food at 8 at the 8 hour mark. Therefore, you never even got into it, right? So if you and for her, let's say 12 hours is the time. If she hits 12 hours and starts eating, and let's say her metabolic switchover was at 12, she got nothing out of fasting. She got nothing additional out of fasting. Nothing additional, right? She didn't get ketones. That the glycogen wasn't fully depleted. She wasn't in the post-absorptive range where the body is switching over because the brain needs glucose, but now it needs to use fatty acids to replace the glucose. She's not in that space, and she doesn't have time to be in that space as well, because it's not just getting to that space, but it's also having some time within that space. So let's say if you're eating, if your metabolic switchover starts at 8, if you don't eat until another 8 hours, which will make it 16 hours. If you don't eat until then, you have 8 hours from that 8 hour period that you're in that metabolic switchover state, and that you're doing all those ketone burning and all that stuff. So it's very important to not only get there effectively, but be in that state for a good amount of time so that you could get the benefits that come from intermittent fasting. So I'm not an advocate for 12 to 14 hour fast being like, if it works for you and you could lose weight, 100% do it. But it doesn't give you any intermittent fasting additional benefits that you get from the process of intermittent fasting. That's all I'm saying. But once again, not telling her not to do it. If it works for her, perfect. Because even if it's not intermittent fasting, even if it's just caloric restriction, the best diet is the one that you can do for the rest of your life. And I've said this since day one. I don't even care that I talk a lot about intermittent fasting. Do not do intermittent fasting if it does not work for you. Do the thing that you can do forever. All right. That's it. That's all I got for this video. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. And of course, as always, guys, I will see you in the next one. Peace out.